Hey everyone, welcome back to The Arena. I'm Mike David, joined by Matt Kavachis, and once again, a very special guest. If you're new here, welcome to our Arena, a space in which we delve into deep conversations around people's life stories and all things health and wellness. These conversations are deep and are meant to inspire others to tap into their own vulnerabilities. I'll pass it over to Matt shortly to say hello and intro our guest. Before I do, love and appreciation to those who are listening. And if you know anyone who is not listening, do send this conversation their way if you think it could be of value. Over to you, Matt.
What up, what up, what up? We have another fun guest here. This is Tori Wilson. I'm going to say my friend Tori. Tori, we're friends. If you didn't think so, we're friends now. Tori is a mental health influencer and content creator, and focuses on all things mental health and specifically around OCD as well as eating disorders, kind of given some of her personal story. So to start, first and foremost, Tori, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for entering the arena. Why don't we start with, who is Tori Wilson?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love having just like really candid conversations about mental health. So this is such an honor for me too to be able to talk to you and your audience. Who is Tori Wilson? See, my page and kind of all that I talk about is about growth. And so I feel like if I kind of were to describe myself, it's really just a girl who can't be put into a box. It's like a girl who's always growing. I think for so long I wanted to be the athlete or the academically minded girl or the pretty girl. And now it's really just accepting the fact that I'm many things all at one time. And for me, it always goes down to like, my core values and knowing that I care about, God, my family, my friends. Like that is truly who Tori is. It's me embracing all of those values and not allowing myself to be put in any box, but embrace those values and embrace all the different hobbies that I enjoy. So.
And what about not putting yourself into a box is so important to you? Like, why is that the way in which you introduce yourself?
I think honestly, since the time that we're raised as little kids, I mean, especially, I can only speak from the perspective of like a young white woman, but I just feel like we're so conditioned to be really good at one thing. Like you need to be the best at one thing. And for women, it's often like you need to make sure that you look beautiful. And that's like the one thing for a lot of girls is just making sure that like they're pretty. And then for some girls, it's like, yep, you're the athlete. And I think for so long, at least with me and my eating disorder recovery journey, I realized throughout my life, I was identifying as first an athlete, and then that changed once sports were gone to, a student. And then once that was done, I was like, okay, like being skinny. And so, I tapped in a little bit into the greater, social conditioning I think we go through. But for me personally, it resonates just because I did go through that eating disorder journey where I struggled a lot with identifying personally just by one thing. And so much of my recovery journey has been allowing myself to explore all the different facets of myself and not just be, the pretty skinny girl, because that doesn't really hold like that much value in the grand scheme of things anyway.
It's so interesting that you talked about, being good at that one thing, and for women, it's about appearance. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking about just being in group settings, how I'll often hear one girl compliment another girl. Oh my goodness, that top is so cute, or your hair is so cute, or, this or that looks cute, or whatever the compliment might sound like. Whereas you don't really hear that from guys, at least not in our locker room, right? Like we're not really, complimenting each other's appearance as much. Like, is that, it's a compliment at the end of the day, but do you feel like some of that stuff might perpetuate, some of this conditioning that you've talked about? What's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, I think often we talk about looking a certain way for the male gaze, but I think we do it for the female gaze, if not more than the male gaze, because, so often we're dressing for other girls to give us compliments, or we're doing our hair in certain styles to get compliments. And I think that just really comes from, again, being conditioned, especially by social media, that like we need to look a certain way in order to get approval from other people. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that it's definitely like performative, and it's definitely like to get compliments from other people, but I think that's like how we've been taught to be. Like I don't think it's like intentional, but it's just like something that we all kind of like subconsciously do.
And so I want to talk a little bit about your journey with your eating disorder. And we talked about this on the Instagram Live, but I was talking with an old colleague of mine who has a daughter at one of the big SEC schools, and she's in a sorority. And they had some night, which this is news to me, where it's like a confession night where you have to confess something that you've never shared with anybody for. And one girl talked about an eating disorder that she felt she had. And as soon as one of them did, almost every single girl, her quote unquote confession was that they had an eating disorder. And so it's clearly very prevalent in today's society. And so would love to just kind of hear your journey, hear your story, walk us through how it starts, how it becomes perpetuated, and ultimately like where it stems from.
Yeah, and this is such a complex question because as I've gone continually through my recovery journey, I've learned how different people's eating disorders are. Um, I often think of eating disorders kind of like an addiction. Like it's not someone's relationship with alcohol, even though they're an addict, might look very different than another addict's relationship with alcohol. And that's very similar with an eating disorder. You might have certain behaviors, you might have an intensity of an eating disorder that's a lot more intense than another person's. And I think there's so many factors that go into this. You know, of course there's the piece of the societal standards and social media, but there's also the piece of genetics. They've literally proven like you have a certain eating disorder gene at this point that like scientists have proven that if you have a certain event that kind of triggers it, you can develop an eating disorder. So I think it's definitely biological as well. I know for me it was trauma induced. I was assaulted when I was a really young kid. I kind of from that developed a range of mental health kind of struggles. I would say I definitely struggled with anxiety, depression, and OCD. And once I quit my sport, which was kind of like the center of my life, and we could have a whole discussion about the overlap between being an athlete, being a female athlete, and developing an eating disorder. But once I did quit my sport, I really didn't know how to be in my body. I didn't know how to exist. I didn't know how to eat properly. I didn't know what fueling myself looked like. Like no one gave me a transition plan out of that. And so for me, it was that trigger where I'd already dealt with a lot of these mental health co-occurring issues. I faced a really challenging part of my life where I was really stressed with school, and then my sport disappeared, and I was like, okay, like what, again, it goes back to that, like what is my identity now? Like what's that like one thing I'm going to cling to? And so I cling to an eating disorder. So that is really my story. It just stemmed from ending my sport, but I will definitely say that I'm not surprised by that story, unfortunately, from the sorority, because I think that reflects the broader like social pressures that a lot of girls feel, especially at college.
And so, for somebody who's maybe newer to hearing about this story, you know, a lot of our therapeutic modalities would be to retrace past events and help you connect dots as to why current behaviors are what they are. Can you help educate the average listener, you know, how exactly a traumatic event in your childhood can lead to, you know, the anxiety and depression that you've mentioned, that leads into an eating disorder? Like, how is that eating disorder? How did that come to be, and how was that serving you in that moment?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that, and I like it because I think at the heart of, and I can only speak to my own experience, but my trauma and my mental health kind of struggles, the heart of that has been control. After my trauma, I had no idea, like, kind of how to process it. I was 6 years old. I had no idea what to do, and I remember telling my mom what had happened, and it actually came out as just me spitting out a bunch of OCD thoughts, because that's how my young brain at age 6 had been processing it. I had really intrusive thoughts about, what if I hurt someone? What if I'm going to hurt my family or my sisters or whoever? And so for me, my brain didn't know how to process it. So it just went right directly to OCD to get control, to get a sense of like, okay, this is where I'm at in the world. I would say because I didn't deal with that, and my parents and myself didn't really know how to deal with, a family member having assaulted me, and shortly dying afterward. I just had a bunch of years, like really critical years in my life, where I wasn't dealing with like any of it. I wasn't going to therapy. No one talked about it. My parents basically acted like it never happened. And so for me, again, to get a sense of control, I just feel like that registered as a lot of anxiety of like not feeling safe, not feeling comfortable. And that often, I always think my depression is linked to my anxiety. I get really anxious and then that makes me depressed. So those are two kind of like fun things that kind of go back and forth. But I would say that threat of control continued until, age 20, where I did develop my eating disorder. And volleyball had been such an outlet for me because I could control volleyball. I could control results. And since that was gone, the eating disorder kind of became that next thing for control. I don't know if that makes sense. I've never really tried to articulate it before, but like now that it's kind of almost, I'm going through it, like processing it through therapy as we talk now. But
it's a giant therapy session today.
Yeah,
I think that's but for real, no, it makes sense. What I heard is, to summarize that, is you no longer felt safe in your body.
Yeah.
And that was going to be one of my questions, is like, how have you learned to feel safe in your body? Because I think a lot of us don't really register what that means. Like we think, oh no, but like my mind, like I'm safe, I'm not in danger, but our bodies need to psychologically feel that way in order to actually relax. And so my question is like, one, how have you kind of worked through that traumatic experience to start to feel more safe in your body? And then two, would love to just learn, like kind of go in depth more into the eating disorder and for our audience in terms of like, so they can maybe understand if they might have some of the same symptoms, what it looked like for you. Would love to just kind of dive more into that in depth.
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of like the eating disorder, the behaviors, things like that, because I think then I'll lead it more into like the therapy and the treatment piece. My eating disorder, and trigger warning, before I go into detail, I will be talking about eating disorder behaviors. My eating disorder started as just pure restriction. So I wanted to be as small as humanly possible. I restricted my food to the point of where I was like eating maybe like a meal and a half a day. Maybe sometimes less. After a year of that, it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm really hungry. So I decided that I would start eating again. But if I ate more than I wanted to, I would purge. So then that transitioned from restriction to restriction and purging. After that, I was really, really hungry because your body literally can't sit in restriction for that long of a time. And so that turned into binging and purging while still restricting some too. And so unfortunately, with eating disorders and recovery, I feel like we always want to put the eating disorder in a box and say it should look exactly like this. And that's just not true. You might have restrictive behaviors. You might have binging and purging behaviors. Maybe you only have binging. Maybe they're foods that you're terrified of because you think they'll make you gain weight. Or maybe you have certain foods, like there's avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. There's so many different types of eating disorders. And so I would encourage anyone, if they do feel like they might have an eating disorder or disordered eating, I know it kind of sounds silly, but I would encourage you, like, go on Nita, take a quiz. I know that sounds stupid, but really that's like when I first realized, hey, maybe something is going on. Like maybe I'm not okay. And then once I determined, after 5 years of kind of going through this cycle of, binging, purging, restricting, that I wanted to get help. And so what that looked like for me was going to an intensive outpatient program. At that program, I learned so many tools. I thought there was going to be a fix it, to be honest, with eating disorder recovery. I thought I was just going to go there, and then once I got back home, I would be fixed. But what I learned with mental health in general is like you can't fix it. It's going to be an ongoing process. And so they gave me a lot of tools. One of them being just like sitting in the discomfort of it all and knowing that you wanted to engage in these behaviors, but not allowing yourself to do it. I always say discomfort is growth, and I wholeheartedly believe that if you're sitting in discomfort, I promise you're growing. I also found EMDR to be super helpful. So that's where you essentially process traumatic memories, locate them where they're at in your body, and kind of work through those memories so that you can change your core beliefs around the memory. And so much of my work was knowing that just because something bad happened to me doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. And so that just honestly like took a weight off my body in many ways. But I would also say, people don't talk enough about medication. To this day, I take medication. I feel like it has allowed me to connect with my body so much. I think it took me to the level where sometimes you have to take medication to literally be at the level where you can implement these tools. When you're in such a heightened state and like freaking out all the time, your nervous system is just at a point where like you're not going to absorb any of the tools. And so, I could go into all of the different tools I learned, but honestly, I would say EMDR, medication, just exposing myself to foods, like exposure response prevention almost. And just like the little tools here and there of like reminding myself discomfort's growth, affirmations, stuff like that. Just it's so funny because everyone will say something different, but I think that just reinforces like recovery is so different for each person. That's just what worked for me because of what I'd gone through. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but
No, it's great stuff, Tori. Well, look, it's not every day that we can chat with somebody who has that sort of life experience and also is courageous enough to speak to it to the level that you're doing for us, Tori. And I would want us to kind of take another kind of level deeper into that.
Do you think, MD, you had Tori enlightened me about this the other day. Do you think you had disordered eating?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, 100%. Disordered eating, body dysmorphia. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is my kind of conversation because I'm learning as we're going. So thanks, Tori. And I guess part of what I heard was there was a growth of awareness of it as like, hey, something's not right here. Like this isn't, the long term, but take us to maybe pre-awareness. What is that inner monologue? Like, how are you rationalizing it, at its peak, state, if you will?
that is such a good question. You guys are really making me think, and I appreciate it. Because I think when you're going through it, so I would say that there's like the early stage and then the mid stage. So like right before recovery, you're probably like falling apart. That's usually why people recover, because they just can't do it anymore. But the beginnings, it almost feels like you're doing something right when you have an eating disorder because you're doing the things, right? You are restricting your, which unfortunately is literally praised by all the different what I eat in a days I was watching at the time, or different social media influencers who were trying to be their absolute smallest selves. Like I was just trying to be my smallest self. Like I was doing the right thing, right? That's what I had been told. Like you're supposed to be small now. And so it felt really good at first. It really did. And then in the middle, when I was still engaging in these behaviors, I realized that I was my smallest self, but it never felt like enough. And that's when you know that something's wrong. When you're in the middle of an eating disorder, when you're in the middle of an addiction, it comes to be a time when you realize you can't live without that thing. It's a codependency. It's never going to end. You're in a cycle. Like, I think that every single day of knowing it was just going to be another part of the cyclical nature of like, oh, I engage in the behavior and then I feel really good and then I feel really ashamed, but then it's kind of addicting, so I'm going to do it again. That's when you know that like something's not right. And it really is like, that's how I know I am in true recovery, because life every day doesn't feel like a cycle.
What was the shame?
The shame was, I I think the shame for me came partly externally because at some points my family and my friends had made comments about, you don't look healthy, or they were aware that I was purging. And so there was a lot of shame around that. But I also think internally there did come a point where I was like, okay, I know this is not healthy. Like I just have a feeling that this isn't right, because it feels really good and empowering to be, in the gym, eating healthy. Like all these things are good things, but anything taken too far, like it just can be really dangerous. So I think I just had that, I don't know, I just got to that point where I was like, I know it's not healthy anymore. And I felt a lot of shame about that because I was like doing all of it for health, right? Like, but then it just wasn't healthy anymore. So I was like, I'm a complete failure.
There's one of the thoughts that
Yeah,
I'm
there
MDS
you go.
about.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, if we want to get into thoughts, right? It's like I'm a failure. I specific eating disorder thoughts I would say are, I can't eat that. That's like way too much fat, carbs, whatever. Like, oh my gosh, look at what she's eating. She's eating so much less than me. Oh my gosh, what's the time on the clock? Like, okay, I can't eat yet. Um, I'm about to have a dinner tonight, so I'm going to have to restrict all day in preparation for this dinner. Like, just these very overwhelming, intrusive thoughts, and they're all connected towards that greater fear of weight gain. You're terrified of gaining weight, you're terrified of your body changing, and so you're going to have intrusive thoughts to constantly keep yourself in check to make sure that fear doesn't come true.
Yeah, it's exactly the opposite of intuitive eating,
Oh,
which
yeah, the exact opposite.
well, it's just one question on while we're on the topic of relationship with food, if you will. One of your pieces of content that you posted on your Instagram talked about how a best friend of yours made you feel safe around food. Again, like common tongue, average person, they're like, what the heck does this person mean about food being dangerous, or not feeling safe, or feeling safe or unsafe around it?
Mhm.
Um, Help us understand that, 101 it for us, in terms of what does it mean to feel safe or unsafe around food?
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I think that piece of content performed pretty well. And I think it's because a lot of girls resonate with it. Um, Often, unfortunately, in circles of girls particularly, we just have complicated relationships with food. We're told from a very young age, for the most part, unfortunately, that eating less is a good thing. It's a sign of, I guess, self control. It's something that ensures that we exist in smaller bodies, maybe. Um, I think there's certain foods, like a lot of those diet culture messages of don't eat something like too fattening, or don't eat something with too many carbs. Like a lot of those are pretty pervasive conversations in just everyday life, like talking to friends. Like I'll talk to friends and they're like, I'm trying to be good today, so I can't eat that donut. Or like, yeah, or
I hear it all the time, so yeah.
yeah, my boyfriend is just my garbage disposal. I eat like 3 bites and then I just give it to him. And it's this messaging where the more we engage in that rhetoric, the more we're reinforcing subconsciously these really negative messages about eating less, eating healthy equals you being a good human. And eating more, eating less healthy equals you being a bad human or a bad girl. And so when I was talking about feeling safe, I was thinking about a particular friend, and I grew up with her in as an athlete, and we grew up together, played volleyball together, and she just is the perfect example of intuitive eating. She doesn't care what other people say. If she's super hungry, she'll eat as much as she wants. Like she's just an inspiration to me, and she makes me feel like I can do it too. I can eat intuitively. I can eat till fullness, and there's nothing wrong with eating more than other people, eating less healthy than other people. I can go and live my life. And so that's really what I meant from that, is just like, it's so crazy, but there's just these girls who are just like amazing humans who just have that ability to eat intuitively and have a great relationship with food. And unfortunately, they're kind of few and far between. But yeah, that's what I meant by that.
They are. I mean, they stand out. I've come across a couple, not just girls, just people that, eat intuitively. And
Yeah.
I always felt, as I've struggled with my relationship with food and my relationship with myself generally as it pertains to food and body image, like I've always felt a degree of envy. Like, man, like, if only I could be as carefree as that person. And,
Yeah.
you'll rationalize it as like, oh, I don't have their metabolism, or, they're not as passionate about how they look that I am. We call it passion. So no, it's cool to hear you really take like everyday typical messaging and turn it into just how damaging it can be, and then what the reverse of that looks like. So that's really helpful to hear.
Yeah.
How, how it, I feel like part of it is like, how do you know? Well, you mentioned MD, like you just tell they're carefree about it, but how do we really know that? Like, how do we know what's going on inside of their appear? And my second question is, how do I be a more supportive? How can I make people feel safe around food? Because like for me personally, I eat very clean, generally speaking. Now my relationship with food has transformed quite a bit over the years. I was definitely on like the extreme restriction during the week, and then binge the heck out of Doritos, Cheetos. I mean, you name it, everything. Stuff it in the face on the weekends, and then rinse and repeat over and over and over again. But now I eat very clean, not for that reason. For the most part, it's more just because I know what makes my body feel good. But I don't
Yeah.
want others to not feel that they can eat what they would normally want to eat because they're in my presence. So like how can I be a more supportive friend when it comes to that relationship with eating?
See, that's a good question. I think what I will say is all you can do is live your life, not restrict, as long as you know you're not restricting and you're doing what's healthiest for you and makes you happy and is fueling your body. Live your life, and you truly can't control other people's triggers. That's something that I've had to learn, is like, if someone is struggling, of course you want to be supportive, and of course you want to make sure you're fueling your body around them. Like, don't actively restrict in front of someone, obviously. But the people who make me feel most safe around food, like, honestly, just go about their business. They just live their life. Like, they don't, like, you can't, I've really learned you can't worry about triggering other people, because the last thing those people want anyway is you like trying to step around, like not stepping on their toes. And so, at least for me, like, why I really appreciated this particular friend is, ever since I've known her, she's always just like done whatever she wants in relationship to food. And I think having that close relationship with her, where like I've always known she has really good intentions around food, but also just like her interactions with me. Like, sometimes I feel like those deeper friendships are where you can really like make someone feel safe. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Are you gonna ask a question? Go ahead, MD.
Yeah, I've when I first learned about like healing, I made the mistake of thinking it was like point of no return. Once you're healed, you're healed.
I was
And
just
I think you
thinking the
mentioned
same
it.
thing. I was gonna ask the same question or something along those lines. Look at that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right. So I guess the question is, perhaps you're not at a point of no return, and I think you've kind of mentioned it at one point earlier that it's a work in process. It's
Yeah.
always you're always working on it. Do you kind of bring us into that a little bit in terms of like current Tori?
Yeah.
What does that line look like? How close to the edge do you really feel like you ever get, or what does that experience look like day in and day out? Because I think sometimes we can get this ideal or this idea in our heads that, oh, Tori's made it and she's done, and like she'll never face another challenge in this regard again.
Yeah, and what's actually so funny about that is, like, lately on my stories, but I haven't put it on Instagram yet. But on my stories, I've been talking about, I'm thinking about going back to treatment, which is really surprising for a lot of people, because they're like I don't want anyone to think I've been lying to them, because I haven't. Like, I'm doing pretty well. Like, I truly am. But here's my thing. I've changed my view of treatment completely. I'm like, I want to go to treatment to like spend more time in therapy and groups to like deal with my trauma, like deal with some of my OCD, like, I don't know, like have these like cool conversations. So like, honestly, if if I were to be like, how am I doing now? I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing the best I have been like probably this entire year. I have the best relationship with food I've had in forever, and I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I'm like intuitive eating. But I also think, I had some real big struggles this year too mentally. I don't think I've ever even thought about going back to the eating disorder. It's just not an option for me. I really made that a clear, decision in my mind. But mentally, just having a few different co-occurring things going on with my brain, I had quite a few months this year where I was like, man, I'm struggling. Man, I am really struggling. And I just want to encourage anyone, like you said, Mike, like there's no getting there. There's no shame in being like, okay, I want to go back to treatment because I want to, not because I feel like I have to. Like, even for me, my treatment team's like, you don't need treatment, but I want to go. Like, I want to go get more support. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just true growth, true feeling like you've made it to the other side is knowing that your intentions now are truly to like, I want authentic me, Tori, to be the best that she can be. I don't want the eating disorder. I don't want to give any power to it. As long as I'm not fueling it, I'm winning. And so for me, I think that's just taken away all the shame of my struggle, all the shame that I have around like, what will people think if I do XYZ? Well, it doesn't matter because I know I'm choosing authentic Tori. I'm doing what's best for her.
Oh man, that's a great answer right there. That got me amped up because what I kind of heard is like you're almost moving now from more of a place of abundance rather than like a scarcity mindset. Like you were moving from a
Yes.
place of I love myself. I mean, we all are struggling in certain parts, but more broadly speaking, moving from a place of love and like, hey, I want to go to treatment because I know that when I improve myself, that I can show up better for other people as well. I mean, it's the same for me. I'm the happiest I've ever been. Love life. Joy comes pretty easy for me now, and I just started doing breath work, for trauma healing, which is the most intense thing I've ever done in my life. And I know I had the same kind of mindset around when I was getting help of, once I come out, boom, life's fit, I'm fixed, life's good, I'm cruising for the rest of my life. And then I did it. And of course it's, my life is transformed in ways I didn't think were possible. And I've also now had, there's just different layers. There's new
Yeah.
challenges that arise. And so I just love the point on, and I think everyone should really try to internalize that is the work's never done. You're never going to reach the point of, I don't know, enlightenment or whatever you're seeking, maybe, but I
Yeah.
don't, most people probably aren't going to do that. I don't, I'm very committed to this work, and I would be surprised if I get to a point where I'm just like floating in a ball of peace and bliss for the rest of my life. So, I think that's just a great point. I encourage if you. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Ed Milet's podcast, but he always says, "Listeners, I need you to go and re-listen to that what they just said," and that's exactly what I would say here. Go re-listen to that little 2 minute spiel by Tori. MD, you have anything you want to add?
No, unless Tori does.
No, and I love what you just said, Matt. What I would add to that is don't let that be daunting. Don't let the continuous improvement or the need to grow more or the fact that this is a lifelong process, don't let that be something that you're afraid of, but instead let that be something that encourages you of like, I don't have to be fixed. That's the point. Is like there's no once I get here, I've made it. There's just truly like showing up for your best every day and knowing that like if you do that, things really will get better. And you'll get to a point where like things feel very stable and you do feel like pretty joyful every day. But just knowing, like I think whenever I heard people say, healing is a lifelong process, that always felt so daunting for me and so scary because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be fixed. But I think just knowing that like you don't have to be, and it's really supposed to be something that just takes the pressure off of like you have your whole life to like figure it out.
For me, I've read those things before I've embarked on this journey. I'm like, they don't understand. Once I come out, baby, life's gonna be amazing. I'm like, these people
Yeah.
don't. And then I actually did it, and I'm like, oh, that ain't true.
It's funny. I guess a pivot here would be some of your content. As I just scrolled through, what screamed out a little bit was this idea of overthinking. Like, don't overthink it. And I just wondered because you mentioned anxiety, which
Yeah.
is a million thoughts a minute. Um, talk about a bit about your experience with overthinking and why you make it. Maybe it's not intentional, but there's a point in some of your content to make it a point to call out overthinking as something to be cautious of or to watch out for.
Yeah, and I think overthinking in for anyone is obviously not a great thing to do, but especially people in a healing journey or in a recovery journey from a mental illness is like the more you overthink it, the more power you're actually giving to that illness. So like for me, what I've found, especially, and I would say quite a bit of what I talk about on my Instagram is typically like more ED related, just because that's the most recent like recovery process that I've been through. And so with my eating disorder, there would be days where I'm just literally overthinking everything of like, am I doing this right? Am I doing recovery right? Am I a good example to other people? Did I eat the right amount? Did I not? Like just and then that's where it starts, right? But you can quickly, like so quickly take yourself down a spiral where like you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I wholeheartedly believe that a lot of the thoughts we have are just lies and we can create an entire reality based off of those lies that can take us to a really dark place. And so and it's scary because I've even been taken to that dark place of thinking at least passively like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. Like I'm just like so sick of this. I'm so sick of feeling this way. And I remember how dark it felt being there. And so it might seem like I'm just addressing something that people kind of throw out of like, oh, I'm such an overthinker. But no, I've seen how overthinking can spiral you to super dark places. And so what I'm really encouraging people to do is trust yourself, trust your intuition. Don't trust these lies in your head. If you identify the thought and you can say, that's actually not true. I replace it with something that's true. Don't even entertain them because it can take you to not a great place.
And so, how much did you have to like revise your environment or reshape your environment? Because I would imagine, the environment has influenced us in so many ways, perhaps negatively, in terms of inducing ED and whatnot.
Yeah.
Just what are some of the things you've had to do to like reshape some of your environment to be more supportive?
It's a really good question. I think, and I hate this word because everyone throws it out all the time, but it's actually really true, is creating boundaries primarily with people. So I create boundaries with who I spend my time with and how much time I spend with them. There's certain, family members that I just can't really be around because they're just not conducive for my recovery. And I think that's okay. I think at the end of the day, as long as you're taking care of yourself, you'll show up better for the people in your life. And so I think you really do have to prioritize yourself and your happiness instead of people pleasing and giving people the time and the energy that they don't necessarily deserve. And so for me, it's really been, yeah, limiting my time with certain people. Luckily, I have like a really good support system around me and a really good network of friends that kind of are sparsed out throughout the entire country. So a lot of like friendship wise is just kind of like catching up on FaceTimes or texts and stuff. And so that's been really nice of just even like having those boundaries there where I can kind of control the conversations. But yeah, I think some people's environments can be really toxic. And I think a lot of times we think that we're the victim in that situation and that we can't do anything about it. But unless you're, under 18, you truly can. Like you can change your environment. You can create boundaries with people. And I think that's really important.
You always have a choice, even when it
Yeah.
may not seem like it may be difficult. But I really, really, really love that last point because it can be so easy to play the victim, especially for the reason you just said. Well, it's my family though. I
Yeah.
can't set a boundary with my family. I got to see them, and at some point, sometimes we got to choose ourselves, even though that may be in our well-being, and as difficult as that may be. Um, oh gosh, what was I going to ask? I had a nice little question, Tori. It was around boundaries. Oh yes, I remembered. Sometimes you just got to talk it out. what boundaries have you had to set, if any, or on social media? Just being, I see you laughing already. But
Oh yeah.
the second part to that question is, has it been a net positive or a net negative for you?
Yeah, I love this question. So, um, God has just really put it on my heart that he wants me to have this social media platform. It's for, encouraging others, inspiring others, showing them his love, and I'm really grateful for it. But I think so much my first year into recovery, so much of that platform was me genuinely giving so much of my energy and time to it because I had felt like I saw the light, right? Like I felt like I finally saw the solution to ending eating disorders, and I was just going to inspire all these people, and I was so motivated. And so I would respond to every single DM to the point where my friends, like during dinners, would have to be like, Tori, get off your phone. And I have never been one of those people who's like obsessed with her phone. I used to lose it like all the time, like never knew where it was, like just didn't care about social media. But now I just felt, this calling to help people. And so for me, a big struggle I had was I was taking time away from people in the moment, like my friends and family, not spending time with them because I was responding to DMs. And they were important, don't get me wrong. These were kind of life and death sometimes. But it's also like it's not, at the end of the day, I had to realize I can't just save everyone. I like that is literally me being that people pleaser is what caused me to have an eating disorder in the first place. And so that was a huge boundary I had to set. And second, just like not caring about like you're going to get negative things from people. You're going to get really positive things from people of saying like you're amazing. And like for me, it's just been learning to be neutral in the face of all of that. I don't want any
Isn't that kind of
validation.
weird? It's like because now I have a much smaller platform than you, but like even sometimes I'll get like, Matt, you are amazing. I love you so much. And
Yeah.
you don't even know me. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, but that doesn't feel really genuine because you don't even know me. You just see what I put out. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, at first it felt really good. But then if any part of my identity is coming from external validation, I don't want it because that's fleeting. That can go, like I can do one wrong thing and all the validation's gone. And so like literally this past year and a half, I feel like God's like literally been performing open heart surgery on like my relationship with social media because it was so like I wanted validation. I wanted people to tell me I was doing awesome. I wanted people to think that I was helping them and that I was so cool. And of course, that's not why I created it. Of course, I created it out of really good, like heartfelt intentions. But like social media is just that slippery slope where like you get addicted. You get addicted to like just people praising you and stuff. And so, yeah, I would say now it's kind of, I've kind of gone off to the other side of where like I don't really respond to DMs, but I've needed it. Like I've needed like, I can only give what I can give. I've been such a more present like partner and friend because I haven't been as, on my phone all the time as I was previously.
go ahead, OD. I was just gonna say it really I relate when I first got on social media and we started this podcast and I had just come out on the podcast and gotten a bunch of support and I'm like, I'm gonna change the world. If people asking me a question, well, I want to change the world, so I've got big plans. Okay, I need to travel. I gotta impact millions and millions of people. It's just like so naive in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But what's changed is that I still think I can do that, but I can do that by just being a kind human being, by
Yes.
showing up with respect to every single person that I interact with. There's a domino effect there. And to me, that's much more sustainable than trying to generate millions of followers and respond to every single DM and be in the public stage like that. To me, is kind of artificial. And it was really, if I think about it, I was doing it for the wrong reasons at the end
Yeah.
of the day. I was doing it for some of that validation. Whereas
Yeah.
now, like, I should be creating more content than I really am because I don't really like doing it because it takes presence away from like me being here now. And I love the present moment. Like that's to me where all the beauty lies. Sorry, go ahead, MD. I really relate to kind of what you were saying when you were first kind of taking off, if you will.
Yeah, that was well said. I really like that.
Yeah, no, somewhat related. When Matt went through, I guess, the beginning of his healing journey, what we noticed was just kind of like he had all this energy and passion to then impart his learnings and his journey on others that could heal similarly. And it seems like you also have this energy and this passion shaped by your experiences. And we just had a conversation about, this idea of like finding purpose versus following your passions. I'm just wondering, how has this entire experience helped shape a lot of what you're maybe passionate about today? How has it helped shape, a sense of purpose in your life? And maybe how has that maybe changed from what it might have been in the past?
Yeah, so I think even from a young age, I remember at like 6 years old, I wanted to help people. Like I used to think I wanted to be a doctor. I think I told you this, Matt. I used to think I wanted to be a doctor, and then I was like realized I was terrified of blood, so I couldn't do it. And so I think this, finally having this platform, and I've been volunteering like my whole life. I'm such a, like, I really, truly, it just makes me happy. Like allowing people to feel seen just makes me so happy. And I think it's because I've always felt a little outcast ever since I was like sexually abused as a really young kid. I transferred schools like every elementary through high school through college. I've transferred schools. So like I always felt like a little bit of a loner, a little bit of an outcast. And so I really enjoyed like helping people and making them feel seen. And so I think with this platform, I don't exactly know what it's going to look like in the future and whether it will turn into a career or something like that. But I think just being able to just see the impact I'm making on people, like just sometimes the little messages of just like someone saying like, you allowed me to have the courage to like tell my parents that I had an eating disorder or seek out mental health treatment or do whatever. Like, I don't think we realize sometimes how it's just like having these like small intentional conversations with people, because that's where I was impacting them. It was through like these like off-sided like conversations. Like that really does make a difference in people's lives. And so honestly, I think I've just realized it's reaffirmed that my purpose is to help people. That's what I want to do. I don't know what that's going to look like. I have a lot of like more, I'm a super big Christian. So like, I truly think God is using this platform too. So I try to, sit in prayer with it. Luckily, I'm going to have some time. I'm switching careers, so I have a bit of time to really think through it and pray through it, and just hope he continues to expand the platform and his will be done in that area. So,
yeah, it reminds me. Go ahead, MD.
Just a quick question. How has your relationship with your faith, played a role throughout your experience? Like, were you as faithful, when you were going through, maybe we'll call it your rock bottom? Did your faith ever waver? Did your relationship with your faith ever change in those moments?
Yeah, I would definitely say like I became a Christian when I was in seventh grade. But I definitely strayed away from the faith, and it wasn't until I hit rock bottom about a year and a half ago to where I was like, okay, I think God is actually like
That'll
trying
wake
to
you up.
back here. Yeah, it woke me up for sure. And where I can say I am in my faith journey is just like I actually think that all this happened for a reason. I think that it sucked, and I don't think that God caused it. And I think that bad things happen to good people because we live in a really broken, effed up world. But I do believe that believing in God throughout this process, believing that he can bring good things, fixed things out of broken things, he can create like beautiful things out of broken things, has just shown me that like all of this is going to make sense one day, because there's so much like crap going on in the world that I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this just sucks. Like some of the DMs I get from people, some of the things people struggle with, I'm like, this is hard, and I don't know how to answer your question. I don't know why this is happening to you. It's not because you're a sinner. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's just because the world's effed up. But believing in a higher power, believing in God, that he literally sent his son to die for my sins because he loved me so freaking much, and he is love. Like that is all God is. God is love. He's never going to leave me. He's going to empower me. He's going to protect me. Like truly having belief in that higher power, like throughout this process, has just enabled me to be like, okay, Jesus, like I give you the control. Like, I have literally my entire life been trying to seek control, and you're finally telling me, like, I've got to give it up to actually feel free and in control. That's what's crazy, is like, you have to give up control to him to like feel like you're in control. And that's, I think, I know that was a mesh of a bunch of different things, but it's because God never teaches in linear steps. It's just like a mesh of like a bunch of stuff that you learn through all the brokenness. So
That's very well said. I've had a very different but similar journey when it comes to faith and figuring out what the heck I believe in and how it's taken shape. But I will tell you what, when I hit that rock bottom and came out of it, because in the moment I didn't. I will say, like, I was never religious, never believed in a higher power, and even in my rock bottom didn't. But as I started to come out of it, I'm like, oh wow, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So this didn't just happen for any reason. I always say, like, at one point I was a victim. It was, why me? Why do I have to be this way? Why can't I just be straight? It eventually became, there was some acceptance, like, okay, this is who I am, but I'm still not proud of it. And then it became, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I wouldn't have the wisdom I have. I wouldn't be sitting right here if not for those experiences. I've lived a very privileged life. I've grown up with money and done all the things, and I've been blessed. And this humbled me, and it still humbles me every single day. And I attribute a lot of it to just believing that there's something greater. And the more I let go of control, the more I surrender to whatever the heck God has in store for me, I mean, it's working, I'm happy, and not all the time, but I understand that, the challenging moments are there for a reason as well. When we were talking about purpose, there were a couple of things that stood out. One, we had a guest, this might resonate with you, Tori, but what I think you were saying, MD, was, well, what you said was, my purpose is really to serve others, help other people. And we had a guest on here that said, everyone's purpose is to serve. The way in which you do that is unique to your personal experience. And I think that's really true. You think about me, you think about yourself. We had a guy that was bullied for being overweight, had a kid with somebody, and then she left him because she said he was overweight, and he turned that pain into purpose as well. And now he's a trainer and a bodybuilder and helping other people with the same thing that he struggled with. So, but it's also crazy, like you had mentioned some of the DMs. Like, I remember I got one, like, I just post once a day. I didn't post a lot. Today's going to be a great day. I just say, today's going to be a great day. Here's 3 reasons why. Every day on TikTok, post it. And some of the messages that I get, like, I had one, I think I said, today's going to be a great day because you're going to stand up for yourself. And you're going to, like, stand up for what's right. And they commented, and they're like, yeah, I saw this, and I said, enough is enough. I'm divorcing my husband. I said, from this video? Really? Like, that was what you needed? That's crazy. And all I'm doing is just minding my own business. But it really is like, social media, there's a lot of challenges associated with it. But it can be a force for good if you use it in the right ways.
I agree, 100%.
Do you got any last questions before I ask her kind of the wrap-up questions, which I've already asked you before, Tori, so you got a little taste for it. But what are you most proud of, for those that didn't hear the IG Live?
Oh, yeah, and maybe my answer's changed because I don't remember what I said.
Oh, all right.
But I think what I'm most proud of, and yeah, my answer has changed for sure. I think what I'm most proud of is, like, I never give up. And now that I'm saying it, I think this was my answer when you first asked it, but that's fine because I'm a fighter. I'm realizing that that's not all I am, because I think for so long I've identified as a fighter. But I am a fighter. I don't give up. Like, when things get hard, I just dig in. I'm like, okay, I'm truly, like, never going to stop pushing for my happiness, for my health, for a good relationship with God, for truth, for helping others. Like, I'm not going to give up. And so I've become really resilient, especially in the last year and a half fighting this eating disorder. And I'm really, really proud of that.
Oh man, heck yeah! And that was very aligned. Yeah, I think you had mentioned basically that it could be that you're proud that you never went back.
Yeah.
That you could have, you still can. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from going back to your older ways or giving into some of the craving, whatever it might be for you. But that you've always chosen to really prioritize your well-being and choose yourself, which is wonderful. So, Tori, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was such a great convo, and like truly thank you for even having this platform. Like, you truly don't know what it means to like the general mental health community, having like resources like that, and just having these like really cool conversations. It's so important, and I'm so happy you guys are doing it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tori.